Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, joined by Pete. What's up today, dude? We got a double feature to discuss.
We do. We've got the most epic of epics, Barbenheimer.
Barbenheimer.
As it's colloquially known now.
It's really caught on. Everyone is talking about it. Barbenheimer.
Exactly.
Without further ado, let's dive into Christopher Nolan and Oppenheimer. As we always do, let's set the scene first. When did you see it? How did you see it? What was your level of excitement and enthusiasm going into it?
Okay, so this is an interesting one. In India, movies officially release on Fridays, just like they do in the US and in Europe. And typically speaking, a Wednesday or a Thursday release is called a preview release.
Oh,
now, there was no Thursday release for Oppenheimer or for Barbie. However, for the first time I've seen in a long time, and I think this is, at least definitely for the first time since the pandemic, they did a midnight showing of Oppenheimer on Thursday night, which is like rare and unheard of. Yeah. So,
all right.
Obviously, I did not see that because I didn't want to come home at like 4 o'clock in the morning. But
it's 3 hours
told
long.
me that there was a level of anticipation or excitement for the film. And you know how I know that's true? Because the first showing was at 7:30 in the morning and it was sold out.
7:30 in the morning?
And it was sold out? I saw it at 9:10 in the morning on a Friday. It's a working day otherwise.
Right.
And it was packed. And I mean, like, I had to go to another theater than the one I wanted to see it, and I wanted to see it in IMAX. The IMAX was, like, the only seat they had left pretty much was the front row, which anyone who's seen an IMAX screening knows that is the worst of the worst ideas.
Right.
At 9 o'clock in the morning, it was full. And this isn't exactly a lighthearted romp, yeah?
Yeah.
So that's how the scene was. It was, people were enthralled with the movie.
Let me dovetail that and say how I saw it, because I saw it in Dubai also on a Friday morning. And I was originally thinking I would see it on a Thursday night when it opened. And I went to book online, like through an app, and almost every seat was taken except for like the front corners.
Exactly.
I sincerely thought the website has a glitch. Like something is wrong. They're showing all these seats as full. Then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll see it Friday morning. Friday happened to be a holiday in Dubai, so it was a day off. I saw it at 10:15 in the morning. So the malls usually open at like 10. The earliest you could conceivably see it in a cinema. And I thought, look, I expect the afternoons to be busy. It's a day off. But this isn't like 10 a.m. is what I think of as like the time when you take the kids to movies.
Yeah.
Like I would expect maybe Barbie or something to be a little bit like that's a good time for kids. But I was like, I just don't see like a lot of date night at 10 in the morning. I don't see people like getting up on a day off. Maybe they'll see like a 1 or a 3 or something. I just don't see it on a 10:15. I booked and it was, again, I thought there was something wrong with my browser. I'm like, it cannot be this full. It was every single seat taken. All right, so I took a seat towards the front in the direct middle. I have to say, I'm still not sure exactly what happened because there were a bunch of open seats, mostly on the side. But when I looked behind me, it was packed. I've never been in a cinema in Dubai that was so full. And I was shocked that it was 10:15 in the morning and it was like that. So based on our joint experiences, what do you think was driving this?
Honestly, I could not tell you. I didn't expect this in the international market. Like I could have in the domestic European and domestic North American markets.
Yeah.
A lot of it is also because Christopher Nolan is a famous director there. Like he's well known, not just for Batman, but like Interstellar, Tenet,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. Like
Yeah.
he's got a very interesting filmography behind him.
Yeah.
Hand on my heart, I didn't think that would translate here.
Yeah.
That was my own cultural bias, but I just didn't expect it to be as full as it was.
I agree with you. Nolan is definitely a big name director, but I think it's been a long time since a director's carried a film like this. And I have to say, my initial reaction is that while Oppenheimer is maybe a historical famous figure, I really did not think that he had the global reach, or that story had the global reach to captivate so many audiences, right? I would have thought that's a much more niche story, actually.
I totally agree. I think most people will, okay, out of every 100 people, I would expect 99 of them, actually, I scratched that. 100 of them will understand that atomic bombs and nuclear weapons were used in World War II for the first time.
Yeah.
Out of that 100, I would expect that 75% of them would know about the Manhattan Project overall.
Yeah.
And out of that 100, I would think less than 20 would know significant members or names of the scientists behind the Manhattan Project. Like, I just don't think that that's a very common or famous, name.
I can even say from my own experience, if there'd be like a Jeopardy question, and the question would be, what was the atomic bomb program called? I'd be like, Manhattan Project. They say, okay, who was the head of that? I'd say, I don't know. And then say
Right.
It was Robert Oppenheimer. I'd say, oh yeah, you know what? I think I knew that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have came up with his name directly if asked.
Yeah. So outside of Oppenheimer and like maybe four, and I'm being generous, maybe four
Yeah.
other scientists that I can think of off the top of my head that I remember.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
now we're talking about high school physics. So this
Yeah.
is like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we're talking a
Yeah.
long time ago. That's about as deep as I could go in terms of name recognition.
Yeah, I agree. So what was driving the demand for this? Was it crowd effect? Was it marketing? Was it, my pet theory, a pent-up demand for original cinema? Where was it?
I think it's exactly that. I think it's a combination of everything. I think
Yeah.
it's a little bit of every movie this summer has kind of been meh.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of every other movie has kind of been the same formula.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of, hey, that's the guy who did Batman. That's
Yeah.
Cillian Murphy. That's like,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about it, but it's an all-star cast.
Yeah.
And a little bit of it is also like, you know what? I don't know that much about nuclear bombs. I know they look cool when they blow up. I'm interested in seeing one blow up on
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah. A little bit of like history lesson in
And
a
a
fun
little
way.
bit of history lesson without it being too much of a history lesson.
Yeah. We both went yesterday, Friday mornings. What was your knee-jerk reaction during and when you walked out of the cinema?
I was on tenterhooks and breathless for a majority of the film.
Wow.
We've joked about it in the past. First of all,
Yeah.
this is a really long movie, right? So it's like 3.5 hours long. Again, the beauty in India, they have the intermission.
Intermission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, well-deserved intermission. Like
Yeah.
it was perfectly
Yeah.
timed. Second of all, the movie for me moved at such a breathless pace that I didn't even realize that 2 hours had gone and an intermission was in place.
I think it clocked in at like a solid 3 hours, but yes, it's 3:15 when you add in all the previews and 3:30 when you add the post credits. But I thought it was definitely a little bit on the long side. I wouldn't have objected if they would have condensed it into 235 or 240, to be honest. But I agree. Towards the end, it was still tolerable to me. Like, unlike, I think, Avatar, Way of Water. I mean, towards the end, I was just exhausted. I just wanted it to end. I thought this was a little bit more tolerable because the pace was pretty good. The thing that struck me during this, and now I think we get into it, I thought the entire movie going experience was exactly what you want and you expect when you go to a cinema. The sound, the music, I thought was exceptional.
Absolutely. I mean, beyond exceptional in the sense that the visual effects were incredible. So, okay, we should talk about this. This is a biopic, and as such, everything is theoretically a spoiler. It's a true story. It's a biopic.
Yeah.
Some things have been very lightly dramatized.
Based on a book as well. So
Well,
it's not
exactly.
an original.
So it's not like there's any plot hooks that you're like, oh, I wonder if this is going to happen. We all know how the story ends, right? Or at least we all know how the Manhattan story ends.
Yeah.
They obviously are successful.
Right. I was going to say, I kind of knew like the big picture.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't a surprise to me whether or not the bomb would work when it was tested.
Exactly.
Maybe when it was tested, it was a surprise, but it wasn't that it would ultimately be successful. I guess was known that it would ultimately be used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was known. You know, all those things were kind of known, although I didn't know, obviously, the precise timeline. And of course, I didn't really know a lot about his political struggles, which actually seemed to be the main plot of this story, with the atomic bomb and the science, a little bit of the background, but a very important part of that background.
So, like, I think it was Dunkirk, where Christopher Nolan also played around with time, and then obviously in Tenet as well.
Right.
What I think this movie did really well is that it flitted between the past, the present, and the distance past quite seamlessly. And they did that under the premise that we're not actually even talking about Oppenheimer at the moment. We're at the Senate confirmation hearing for Strauss.
Right.
That's the platform upon which we learn about Oppenheimer and his story.
Right.
Which, as a plot device, I think is brilliant. On the very surface level, this movie is really about the confirmation hearing for Strauss.
Right.
But then you kind of understand that that's just a facade for the real story, which happened 20 years ago before, or, 40 years ago when Oppenheimer was first a student, about him setting up his physics lab, and then about setting up the field in America. And then, of course, about getting into being a part of the Manhattan Project.
Right.
And what this does, which I think most other movies like this don't do, is it goes into the effects of something like this afterwards. I think most biopics would have like culminated with like the victory lap of Oppenheimer. Yeah, I succeeded. I created an atomic bomb. All hail the conquering hero. The end.
Right.
But I think what was really great about this was they were like, no, this is not the end. This was just a way station in his life. He suffered dramatically because of it. He bore a very heavy weight because of it. And we get to see a little bit more about that and how he kind of processed that, how the people around him processed that. I thought that was really, really cool because it's almost a given that he's going to succeed in creating the bomb. In fact, it's not almost a given. It's a given, right? This is history.
Right.
We understand that that's happened.
Yeah.
So the interesting part isn't the Manhattan Project. It's the struggle surrounding the Manhattan Project before and after.
Yeah. Do you think there's anyone who walked out of this movie saying that was not a well done cinematic work?
I think that person was probably falling asleep if they did.
Even objectively, I don't think that there can really be any debate that Christopher Nolan put together something near masterpiece in terms of the cinematography. He used black and white. He used images that kind of showed like what it would be like in the 50s, the 60s, the costumes, the sound effects I thought was incredible. The way that he uses kind of like this background noise to make tension or to, show uncertainty or build up anticipation. All of that I think is master class level in terms of people being able to use that as a model of what to do.
Yeah.
I think that's a given. I don't want to belabor the point. Bravo, chef's kiss, as you would say. Superb effort. Deserves a lot of technical awards.
No, I think you're right. I think this is going to, objectively, as a technical movie, I think this movie is going to stand the test of time. I think
I agree.
This is the kind of movie that film students are probably going to sit in their classrooms 30, 40, 100 years from now. And they'll be like, if you want to see someone who gets what cinematography is,
right,
this is the movie for you to watch.
Yeah, I agree. Putting all those accolades aside, I feel like the story is less exceptional than the film work was.
Okay.
The story, to me, I'm not sure that I agree with some of the statements that this was the most important thing in the history of the world, or that Oppenheimer at one point, had this level of, significance. I really think the story is less enthralling than the overall cinematic work that he did to bring it to the screen.
I actually think I disagree.
Okay.
I think that maybe I don't disagree, but what I will say is that the story was far more compelling than I thought it had any right to be. And I say that because I didn't really know about anything about Oppenheimer's personal life. I just knew that he was a brilliant physicist who led the charge behind the creation of the bombs. But I didn't know anything about his personal life, about, his love life, about his academic life, about the political life, all of those things I didn't have any knowledge of. And I was strangely compelled with that interrogation/kangaroo court sequence, in the sense that when we get to learn a lot more about him, I was strangely compelled. Ultimately, I think you're right. It's just that the cinematography is so good that there are very few stories out there.
Yeah, I think it distracts you from the fact that the story was kind of like, meh.
I think that if you were to grade it, we're probably both grading cinematography as like an A+.
Yeah.
And you're probably grading the story at like maybe a B+. Whereas I walked in thinking it was going to be a B+, and for me, it's a solid A. I agree with you that the cinematography outclasses the simple story if you look at the story on its own.
So, for example, if you would have applied that cinematography, I know you can't do this, but if you could copy and paste, and instead of talking about Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb, you applied that story to gunpowder, dynamite, the bullet, the Kalashnikov rifle, would you not have just as compelling a movie?
I don't think so, actually, because the point was that what made it compelling to me was Oppenheimer is asking existential questions about humanity and the need for these kinds of weapons. I understand that the weight that something like that could have on you. On one hand, his idea was, by creating a weapon like this, we then can showcase to the world why it's important that we maintain peace, because this is literally a weapon that could destroy the world. I think he was a little naive in that sense. People aren't always thinking that way. I think people would be like, how do I take maximum advantage to this? And if my neighbor has this, I want the same thing too. The weapon itself is what made it the heavy, compelling part of it. I don't think the guy who invented the bullet or the guy who invented the Kalashnikov sits there and had an existential crisis about it.
I hear your point. In that case, I think that it's a weak point in this movie that I didn't really feel the existential crisis, if there was one by Oppenheimer during the development of the bomb. First of all, I don't know if that's historically accurate or not. He may not have felt that until afterwards, and that's okay. But I would have expected something like he was very conflicted as to whether or not he should take this assignment, knowing that from a scientific perspective, it's his wet dream, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is the ideal thing from a scientific perspective, unlimited budget, unlimited resources, no oversight, and I get to focus on the thing that excites me the most, versus his liberal leanings, which is, this is absolutely not in the best interest of the world. This is the antithesis of everything that I personally believe in. If anyone else was doing this, I would be leading the protest against it. I don't feel that we really caught that internal conflict between those two things. And maybe he didn't have it until after the bomb, but I would have liked to have seen that a little bit, where he's like a little bit Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where he's like, I love working on this. I absolutely should not be supporting this. I should be undermining it. I would have liked to have seen that dichotomy a little bit stronger.
So from what little research and reading I did after, I've come to understand that he really didn't have that feeling, or at least express that feeling publicly, until after the bombings, or at least until after the test bombings. And I think that any feelings that he had, my understanding was he kind of put that to the side because he looked at the greater good and said that, look, the Nazis are already doing this. The Soviets are already doing this. We need to finish this first. Because if we don't finish it first, somebody else will, and they may not have the same qualms as we do, or at least that I do, in using this weapon.
That's absolutely valid. In that case, I guess what I'm missing from this movie is the gravity and the emotionality. Like at no point, and you know, dude, at almost every movie, I choke up, if not outright cry. I'm sure at Barbie I'm going to, right? During Oppenheimer, I felt nothing. At no point did I feel like, whoa, like this is a major decision, or I can't believe he's doing this, or like I didn't feel his emotion where he like had this breakdown where he realized, you know, what he did. They showed it a little bit where he went to like that gymnasium, and he kind of spoke to everybody. They showed it like a little bit, but you didn't see him kind of like go out like behind the shed or behind the house or behind the barn or something, and just like sink to his hands and knees and just like bawl and cry and just have like that breakdown, like, what did I do? I didn't get that. He had like those kind of moments of doubt, and then he turned into, I don't say this lightly, and this isn't a film criticism, this might be an Oppenheimer criticism, then he kind of turned into a hypocrite, which is, you know, what he said like to Truman, which is, hey, now I feel like I've got blood in my hands. And like, it's too late for that, first of all. Like, that's not the way that it works. Like, you can't just express guilt and remorse after. There was a multi-year process leading up to this that you should have found religion, you should have found morality, you should have found what was going to happen. You didn't exhibit any of that. Don't think that you can kind of rehabilitate your soul now by coming out against something that you and you alone developed. I have a little bit of that unhappiness about his hypocriticalness, but that's not a film criticism. That's more of an Oppenheimer as the person criticism.
I can understand that. So in terms of the weight on him, that did come through for me. I agree with you. I thought it was almost too little too late. But you can kind of see it in terms of, and this is all down to Cillian Murphy, like he lost a ton of weight. Like his face was sunken in, like he looked awful. And like he was getting progressively worse the older he got in the movie. So I think they did a very good job that way in depicting that. Although maybe they could have shown more of an outward sense of remorse. Or maybe they couldn't. I don't know. I mean, like this could just
Yeah.
come down to, I agree with you. This could just be an Oppenheimer thing, not a movie thing, where maybe the guy just wasn't,
Yeah.
that emotive about things.
Yeah. And maybe you'll join me on this criticism. We didn't see anything between him and his wife that demonstrated.
Yeah.
And if I were Emily Blunt, I'd be super, super pissed off at this movie. And maybe this is a female issue in Hollywood. She's portrayed as cheating on her husband, right? Her first husband dies, who she followed blindly into something that she wasn't interested in. Then she didn't want to be alone, so she just married the next guy up. Then she cheated on him and got pregnant while she was married. Then she turned into an alcoholic. At no point was Emily Blunt given a strong character, whereas it could have been like, remember A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah.
Jennifer Connelly? She could have been like this or this is a weird comparison, the wife of Ray Kroc in The Founder, McDonald's, where it could have been someone who said to Oppenheimer, when he kind of expressed doubt at home, said, hey, what you're doing is important. Don't lose sight of this, blah, 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 blah. And giving him like this boosting and support. That would have been an Academy supporting actress type of role if you could have seen how strong she was building him up and soothing his self-doubt. She had a horrible character, though. For such a talented actress, just this alcoholic horse riding weirdo.
So, two things. One, I actually think, first of all, we can't criticize Emily Blunt for this because if it's a biopic, maybe that's what the wife actually was like. We don't know.
Fine.
That's the first comment. The second was, I actually disagree in the sense that there were two moments that stood out to me, which did showcase Emily Blunt. Actually, maybe three, in terms of how ferocious she was in this movie. The first was that scene where he's actually not sure if he wants to do this project at the very beginning. And she sits him down and she says, it has to be you. No one else can see this through. You're the only one who can actually see this through. The second was when he finds out that the woman he was having an affair with, Jean Tatlot, Florence Pugh, when she commits suicide and it's raining and he's thrown himself against a tree in the middle of the forest.
That was weird, though.
She comes horse racing out to find him. And she stares him down and says, you don't get to commit the sin and then become the martyr for it.
Right.
So you need to basically nut up, grow up, and continue on.
Yeah.
And then the third thing was in that, last act of the movie where I thought she was the strongest is when she was fighting him because he was martyring himself. Like he wasn't standing up for himself. That scene where Teller wants to shake her hand and she refuses, that was Dagger Eye's performance right there.
That's solid, but why did they have to make her this weird, philandering alcoholic? Like they made her seem like almost a neglectful mother.
But if that's the character, that's the character. If that's the biopic, that's the biopic. I don't think that was a choice that the filmmakers made on a dramatic level. I think that's just like... It's the same reason that, Howard Hughes was a weird guy who wore Kleenex boxes and peed in jam jars. In biopics, these kinds of decisions I would choose not to criticize. For things like in Forrest Gump, however, I think Jenny is fair game for criticism because it's a totally fictional narrative. And when people say that Jenny was a terrible girlfriend to Forrest and a terrible woman to Forrest, I buy into that, and I totally agree. In this case, maybe that's what she was like. Maybe that's what she wasn't like. I don't really know. But I have to also give some trust in the writers that, hey, they know that this is a biopic. They know this is based on a true story. I don't think they're going to change someone's personality dramatically for the sake of a movie. And especially Nolan. I think he's going to be very respectful with the source material.
I mean, maybe that's true. I don't disagree. But I have to say, when you show a scene where he comes home, their son is crying off screen, right? And you just see her, clearly she's been kind of like drinking all day. whether or not that is in fact something that happened or didn't happen, I think that has a dramatically negative impact on how you perceive that character.
Yeah.
Maybe that event happened, but then you also have to take a judgment call. Like, was that the preponderance of her behavior? Like, did she somehow, like fix herself up? Did he fix her? Like, what happened? Because that really prejudiced me against that character. And then when you see her strong kind of at the end, it's like, this doesn't seem like a strong woman at all. I've just been preconditioned to see someone who followed their first husband to do something that she had no interest in, wanted to get married and married the first guy because she was just alone and didn't want to be a widow, married Oppenheimer despite little to no chemistry, and then was kind of like a neglectful mother. And then you're supposed to believe kind of at the end, but oh, by the way, she was like really, really strong. It's absolutely not on Emily Blunt, and it may not even be on Nolan, but it was just, again, it's my little nitpicks. I've said it at the outset, superb film. The cinematography and the filmmaking I thought was much better than the story and the characters, even though I think everyone from that all-star cast, and it was an all-star cast, did a really, really great job. There was no character that I thought didn't do great. Maybe Robert Downey's accent was a little bit over the top at times, but even I thought he did a quite good job. That's a different role for him, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about it. What did you think of the cast? Yeah, well, I mean, veritable who's who.
Yeah.
Starting with Josh Hartnett.
I did not catch that was Josh Hartnett.
Yeah.
Alden Ehrenreich, right? Han Solo as the Senate aide.
Yeah.
Matt Damon, of course. Emily Blunt, of course.
I thought Robert Downey Jr. did a fantastic job as the quote-unquote villain of this film.
Yep, I thought so as well. I thought his accent was a little bit over the top at times.
Okay.
But I thought that overall he brought the right attitude to that role.
I was so impressed with it.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved all the different cameos of the different scientists. So we see Einstein, we see Feynman, we see Teller, we see a bunch of these guys. I thought that was great. I loved that Kenneth Branagh was Niels Bohr.
What did you think about the early scene where you show him kind of like struggling in the lab? Yeah. And then at one point he tries to put like cyanide in his professor's apple.
Yeah.
Did you think that was like
true story,
really
by the way? True story. I checked it up. Apparently in the movie they pass it off that he kind of takes it away just in time. Yeah. But apparently he got caught for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and like his parents had to kind of bail him out of trouble. But apparently that's a true story.
Because that sounds like something to me that would be more consistent with his narrative of building a bomb, where it's like, I don't care. Like, I don't care about any of the repercussions. And if they would have showed him kind of like, and again, it's a biopic, I'm not sure if it's true, but I just felt like if they would have showed him as this very hard person that doesn't care about anyone around him, and he just would have been like this nightmare to work with, and he rode everybody hard, and everyone else was raising kind of these moral concerns, in his scientific community, he was overriding everything. And then after the bomb was dropped, he had this huge like change in perspective.
There was only a minor bit of that, because right after he injects the apple, you see him go to sleep. And then like you see him have a restless night because he's ruminating about what he's done. And that's why he rushes off early to kind of stop it from happening.
Right.
I thought that was a little bit more aligned with the story overall.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, obviously that part's not true because he got caught in real life.
Right.
So again, that kind of dramatization I'm okay with because it's a very minor aspect of his life. And at the same time, it's a nice way to kind of tie into the greater theme of the movie, which is I've done something awful. I've regretted doing it immediately thereafter. I'm going to try to change that. And in this case, with the apple, he was able to, but with the bombs, he wasn't able to.
So what's the takeaway from this? Do you think that Nolan is sending a message? Is he just telling a story and it's there for us to interpret however we want? Is he trying to make a statement or give us a message, like intellectually?
I don't take any messages away from this movie. I honestly think Nolan is such a masterful director and writer. I think that if he wanted there to be more of a message, I took more of a message away from that Joker sequence in The Dark Knight than I did in this Oppenheimer movie. I think he looked at this as just a biopic based on a book, and he made a fantastic screenplay out of this. I don't think his message was nuclear weapons bad, humanity is on the verge of destroying itself. I didn't get any of that. And I think that he could have easily done that if he wanted to, and I think a lesser director might have done that. I could very easily have seen another director throwing in like a montage of all the other wars that we've had in subsequent years, with like a bunch of explosions, with napalm in Vietnam and phosphorus and all these other like gross use of chemical weapons in the Middle East and in Africa. I think you didn't need that with this movie. And I think Nolan recognized that. I think he was just like, look, this movie is about Oppenheimer and about his struggles. I don't want to get into the wider narrative of what this could mean for humanity.
How should I feel about Oppenheimer after watching this? Should I be in awe? Should I feel sympathy? Should he be... How am I supposed to feel about him?
Well, how do you feel about him right now?
This may be a bias due to time, but I don't feel, to be honest, anything. I don't think that he was particularly, what I've seen and read, I don't think he was particularly mistreated. He lost his security clearance and, some crap was thrown on him, not entirely without merit. But I mean, he wasn't like imprisoned for treason. He wasn't charged with any crime. He just lost a little bit of his standing. He didn't have his security clearance. And to be honest, it's not unusual if you're not working on a project anymore to lose your security clearance. Maybe at the time it was because there's a different relationship between government and the scientific community than there is now. But he certainly didn't lose his platform if he wanted to. And he probably could have twisted that around for his own good if he wanted to. I didn't feel like he was particularly sympathetic or mistreated. Definitely he had some type of burden on him, but I don't really feel anything for him. Again, this might just be because we're in 2023 and not 1950, but I don't even feel like he's this critical figure of importance, and that if you need to understand the history of Earth, this is one of the people that you need to study and you need to understand, their journey or their odyssey. He was an important and very gifted scientist who made a very important contribution to a project called the Manhattan Project. And after that, then he just kind of like faded out. He didn't seem to have any more relevance after that.
That's interesting.
What's your take?
I walked into this movie knowing of Oppenheimer and just that he was like the father of the bomb. I walked out of this movie with a lot more respect for Oppenheimer. And maybe this is also like my inherent bias for scientists. Like I've always had more of a respect for scientists, but like I found him to be a highly sympathetic figure who's made, some frankly awful choices in his personal life. But besides that, I felt bad for him.
I think there's something different about the way the world works today versus how it worked back then.
Oh, 100%.
Which is now, I'm not an authority on either one of these aspects, but there seems to be a different relationship between science and government now.
Yeah.
In the movie, it was the government needed to reach out to academics. It needed to reach out to scientists. It needed to convince them and give them the resources to do something. And now I think that has changed a little bit. I think the manipulation is probably both ways. That scientists look to the government to monetize the government because they know that the government has the deepest pockets to subsidize their research. So they're probably, whether you're studying the environment, whether you're studying bird migratory patterns, whether you're studying physics, you're probably always looking to the government to give you funding, and therefore you're almost intentionally prostituting yourself to the government to show them what applications this can have, those are almost always some type of military or cybersecurity type, aspect. And I think governments have no longer respected scientists as academics or as like independent academics. And they've used them more as just kind of like their own workforce, saying, we need this, and we'll just throw money at whoever's going to kind of support us or give us what we want. There's no particular scientist or community that we need to convince to take this on for the overall good. We know that we can just kind of buy whoever we want, to give us what we need.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I also think that the problem in today's society, and this is maybe out of the scope of films and stuff, and more into the scope of politics and stuff, but also because of the rise of social media, I think there's also a lot of people who now have access to the same platform as scientists to be heard. People get equal airtime with scientists, and those people aren't necessarily qualified. If you have a scientist who proposes theory X, there are 50 out of 100 people who support that scientist because this guy has dedicated his entire life to studying this subject and is an authority on this. So when he says theory X is the way it's going to be, I believe him. And then you have maybe another 50% who say, hey, this guy has dedicated his entire life to this subject. He's only in it to get all the money he can and increase his research funding. He's manipulating not just you, but he's also manipulating the government. So you can't trust theory X. It's probably theory Y. And I don't trust this guy anymore. I have no evidence that I'm right, but I'm not going to believe his evidence anyway, which is, in my opinion, unfounded. I mean, when I break my leg, I go to a doctor. I don't go to Twitter and ask 50 people, how should I treat my leg?
Right.
Again, totally out of the scope of Oppenheimer, but I think that's probably where a little bit of the dissonance comes today. And I think that's probably why it's maybe a little surprising to see how respected scientists were and how much, let's say, reverence they were given back in the day versus how much they're given today. I think science has also become a little commoditized now.
Science has also, as a discipline, it's still science. But if you think about like AI is less lab coat department head. And to the extent that it's science, it's now computer science.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason we can't call them scientists, but we really call them developers or coders or entrepreneurs. And it's less academic-y and more entrepreneurially in terms of...
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. In terms of as a discipline,
yes,
there are few to no guidelines. All that matters is that the code works. It doesn't matter that it's peer reviewed by 50 different people. It doesn't matter that other coders look at it and say, I agree, this is the correct code, because 2 + 2 is 4, but guess what? So is 1 + 3, so is 5 - 1. So there's other ways to get to that answer. I agree with you. I mean, going back to Oppenheimer, that's probably where it becomes more of a tough pill for your average viewer to swallow or to understand. Like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal for Oppenheimer not getting his security clearance. It probably mattered because that was a way of kind of showcasing to the world that his work was A, valued, and B, that his words had credibility. Whereas now, security clearance, does it have that much credibility? Probably not.
Okay, let's do two things yet if you want. The first is, let's go through and let's give our rankings for this and give some final thoughts. And then the other half of Barbenheimer, let's hear from you, who has seen the double feature, some high-level thoughts on Barbie. Can we do that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't you tell me, what is Ethan's take on Oppenheimer?
As a rating, I give this a must-see in cinemas. I've said it from the outset. The film is fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's probably the best film I've seen in terms of sound and cinematographic, I got that wrong, elements. It's superb. It's definitely Academy Award worthy. You have to see it in cinemas, I think, just because of the sound, because of the effects. In terms of the story, I can't say that I'm bored or I disliked it. I can just say I don't think it was timeless. And if someone wanted to go see it again, I don't think that it would. You have to see it in cinemas. It's that good. That's my rating.
I too believe that this is a must watch in cinemas. I think I will go one step further and say that you shouldn't just watch it in cinemas, but find a theater that's showing it in IMAX. Christopher Nolan's seminal work. I honestly think this is one of his best, if not his best.
Culmination.
I think this is an example of all of his other movies leading up to this, especially in terms of technical. They invented a new format of IMAX for this movie. It's unbelievable.
But Pete, tell me this. If your girlfriend came to you today and said, "Oh, let's go see Oppenheimer," would you go see it again?
I would definitely go see it again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how much I liked it. I would suggest that if it's an IMAX, we should definitely go see it.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. I think it would be a tough ask for your average person to sit down and watch 3.5 hours of this again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that doesn't, take away from the point, which is if you've not seen it, you should definitely see it. RDJ was a very, very good bad guy. I think Damon was great as the general. I thought Blunt was maybe not as good as the other two, but still very good.
Was Damon good as a general, or was he just serviceable?
I thought he was charismatic. You're right. He probably wasn't unbelievable, but I thought he was charismatic enough that he was believable. Also, would not be shocked if every single one of those people was nominated for an Oscar in their category.
You know who had a very small scene, but I thought was quite good, was Affleck's brother.
In any case, don't be surprised if there are 4 or 5 acting nominations for an Oscar and all of the technical. Nolan should be nominated and as of date should win Best Director. That's how strong I think this movie is.
I agree.
It's a heavy movie. This is a definite must watch in cinemas. Trust me, this is as high a ranking as I could give.
I agree. Okay, so that's Oppenheimer. We both absolutely feel that it is compelling enough to be seen in cinemas, but we're not done. We've got Barbie. You saw it. It still has not come out in the UAE. It's super weird that we're having this conversation. We're both dudes in our 40s, right? We're somehow actually interested in the Barbie movie.
And not for creepy reasons. The caveat, not for creepy reasons.
Right. But I have to say, with Ryan Gosling, it is a little bit more intended for like an adult audience, you must say. It's not out in Dubai. I can't see it. You've seen it. You did the double feature. You did the Barbenheimer back-to-back, right?
I did, and I do not recommend watching Barbenheimer back-to-back.
Why?
Just don't do it.
Why?
It's as if you're going 300 miles an hour in one direction, and without even tapping the brakes, you just throw your car into reverse and then go 250 miles an hour backwards. You're going to break your neck. It is not recommended because you're in the theater for 5 hours and you go from a dark black and white movie to all of a sudden the brightest,
neon,
pinkest, most pastel color movie.
Did you really do them back to back? How much break did you have between the two?
2-3 hours.
Did you stay at the cinema? Like the airport? Like a connecting flight?
No. I went home in between. It's a lot.
How much time did you have at home? Like how close is the cinema to your place?
I'm not joking, like 300 meters, 400 meters.
Ooh.
I'm very spoiled.
All right, so you walk home, you play with the dog for an hour, then you went back did you get like 2 popcorns and everything?
I did. I recharged my popcorn banks and then I went back in for more.
All right, so without spoilers, high level, what's your rating of Barbie? Is what we're seeing?
It's a skip.
No.
It's a skip, and I'm going to caveat this right now. This movie is going to make a boatload of money. It's a skip because this movie isn't for me. It's not for Ethan. It's for our nieces.
Is it funny though?
So there are certainly moments that made me chuckle. There are certainly
Yeah.
some adult-ish jokes in there.
Yeah. Like the beach off.
I'm going to beat you
Yeah.
off. No one's going to beat anyone off. Oh, I'll beat you off all
Yeah.
day, all night. You know what I mean? Like a
Yeah.
lot of double entendres. So, like these are the jokes that the parents of the kids are going to get.
Yeah.
Right? There's a joke about the fact that all Barbies basically have smooth groins and smooth nether regions, right?
Mm.
So Ken is like, can I come over and stay over with you tonight? And Barbie's like, why? He's like, I honestly don't know. Right? You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's just on the verge of potentially being dirty, but it's obviously not.
Yeah.
The first act I thought was absolutely fine. The very high art premise, and this isn't a spoiler because we see it in the trailers, is that Barbie has to travel from Barbie land to the real world.
Right.
Right. And the conceit in the movie is that Barbie world exists simultaneously with the real world.
Okay.
People in Barbie world know that the real world exists, but they're happy staying in Barbie world.
Right.
And so in the real world, Mattel exists. There is a CEO, there's an inventor of Barbie dolls. All of them are there. So the premise is that she travels to the real world for a reason. She figures out that the real world isn't as cracked up as she thought it was meant to be. She goes back to the Barbie world and she learns that in doing so, Barbie world has started to change to become more like the real world in all the bad ways. So the first act was fine. The second act was somewhat okay. The third act for me was a total train wreck. I'm not joking. There was like a 30-minute stretch and the word patriarchy was mentioned like 50 times.
Oh my gosh.
And it goes full scale into the idea of patriarchy and men are bad and blah, blah, blah. It was very heavy-handed.
I'm going to cut you off because I don't want to know more. But it seems like the first part of the movie is where you see everything in the trailer and this is the fun. And then it just kind of goes off the rails towards the end.
Basically. And you know how you asked if Oppenheimer had a message or if Christopher Nolan had a message out?
No.
Greta Gerwig has a message. It's heavy-handed. Whether that's intentional or not, I don't know, but I certainly felt slapped in the face by it. Let's put it.
But you think the movie's still going to do well?
Oh, this movie's going to make a ton of money.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure I'm not the right target audience for it. I think little boys and little girls all across the West are going to love it. People in India were laughing at some of the jokes in a big way. The soundtrack was pretty fun. The color schemes were fantastic. Set design was unbelievable. Highly recommended to see this movie just for set design. It really does feel like an 80s commercial. It was really good fun. The third act kind of stumbled at the finish line. It did not end well for me. And so for me, it's a skip.
Well, I'll see it when it comes out in Dubai. Maybe we can have another discussion about that.
Yeah, technically will still be a summer movie for you. It comes out on the 31st of August.
Miserable.
I think Barbie is going to overperform because I think Barbie is going to be the perfect palate cleanser.
Okay. Let's stay tuned and follow those developments.
That's right. But in the meantime, did you like Oppenheimer? Did you think it was a turd? Did you think it was great? Or did you like Barbie? Did you also do a double feature that almost broke your ocular cortex and spirit? Why don't you let us know? Reach out. You can tweet at us at F&S Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. You can email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. As always, like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel. Those things help us out greatly.
Yep. We always want to hear some good feedback. Agree to disagree. Point out anyone else. Pete, you pointed out a few actors that I haven't seen. I also remember, I think Dane DeHaan was in here somewhere.
He was.
So interesting to kind of see those folks. So tell us if there's anyone else we missed and what you thought of it. Talk about Barbie as well. Apart from that, we will be back next week. More episodes, more things to discuss on films and stuff.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day ahead. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.